All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today on this Wednesday. We have Sherri Coats who will be doing our presentation today. So, Sherri, I will let you get started.
Good morning. I'm Sherri Coats. I'm the Program Director for Special Education at the State Department of Ed. And we have a tremendous amount of resources and supports for districts. And though we try and make sure that we share it out, some say they've never heard of our supports. So I'm excited to share with you. And in the end, I hope that you will access the supports that we have available. And so I'm going to jump right in with the one that everybody always wants to talk about, and that is funding. So we have about $181 million that comes to Oklahoma for special education from the U.S. Department of Ed. And of that 181 million, 19 million is allocated for what they call state level activities. And this is monies that we use for special projects or to contract with entities, individuals, universities, those kinds of things for work that our agency can't do because either we don't have the capacity or we don't have the expertise. And so we have a lot of contracts that we enter into that support schools. But another way that we do that is through specific project funding. Every school, the majority of our funding that comes from the U.S. Department of Ed, like 156 million of it is flow through money. And it's done through a calculation, through a formula where your district is given a certain amount of money based on your total population, your total enrollment, excuse me, your total enrollment. And then it has a calculation in there for free and reduced. And so that is how your federal monies come to you, and you budget those monies through GMS. Besides your main allocation that comes to you based on your total population enrollment, we have special project funding that we set aside for specific purposes. And it is also in GMS. And this is money that you all have access to for very specific things. And so I just want to run through each of the project funds and talk about them and how you can access them and how you can use them in your district. So the first one is what we call Project 613. So this is what we call a statewide allocation. We have about $500,000 allocated to this. So your district doesn't get a certain dollar amount. It's sort of a pot of money that anybody in the state, any district in the state can access until it's gone. And it's never been all gone. And I wish it were. I wish all districts would access this and use it. And so this project money is used to reimburse districts for participating in OSDE special education services, sponsored professional development. This will include hotel if you're more than 60 miles from your professional development, your travel, so your mileage. It will also cover substitute teachers. If you have a teacher that needs to go to a training and you have to provide a sub in her absence, his absence, you can get reimbursed for the sub costs. This does not pay per diem, but it does pay for the other things. There is a list of sponsored PD opportunities that you can look at that. So also when it says OSDE SES sponsored, that means either the agency is putting it on or one of our contracted partners. Like, for example, the Oklahoma Autism Center is a contracted partner of ours. So when they put on trainings, we will pay for that. Our trainings have no registration, but sometimes like Oklahoma Autism Center may have a registration, and we'll even pay for that as long as it's on our list. So that is something that we want you to use. down, and I know that Tyler will give you this slide deck, but I have a link here to our 613 memo, and it tells you what the limitations are and how it can be used. And it also has a link to the Project 613 PD list so that you'll know what things are allowed. Um, so that is 613. 615, we have a statewide allocation of about 600,000. And again, I wish it were used all every year, but it's not. So we would want for you to use this. Now this one is a little bit different from 613 in that your district will get a specific allocation. And you can use the monies that are allocated to your district. The allocation is about $4 per student with a disability. So that's the calculation, with a minimum of 500 per district. So if you're a really tiny district and the number of your students times 4 is less than 500, then we still give you $500. And this must be used for professional development to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. Again, I have a memo here linked, Project 615 memo, and it tells you how it can be used. It can be used for stipends for your teachers if you want to send them somewhere for training in the summer and they're off contract and you need a stipend, or if you want to pay for them to go somewhere for their registration, for their travel, for their covering the sub, or if you want to bring someone in to provide PD for your district, you can use that money for that. So PD, lots and lots of flexibility here. We would want you to definitely use that. This one, again, it has a statewide allocation, so there's not an allocation to your specific district. It's just available until it's gone, which it's never been gone. And so this allows you to reimburse teachers for taking OSAT tests that you need them to take in order for staffing to be appropriate in your special ed classes. So it can include a special education teacher certification test, or it can include a general education certification test. Let's say you have a middle school special ed teacher and they have English, but they need an intermediate math to teach the class you need them to teach. If they go take the test and pass, you can reimburse them the cost of their certification test once they pass. And then that way you will have a certified math special education teacher. So that is whatever OSATs you need them to take in order to be certified appropriately for a special ed setting class. That's what that does. So it can be somebody who maybe they're mild moderate certified and you need them to be severe profound certified. They can go take that test. Or let's say you have a general ed math teacher who's willing to go become special ed certified. It'll pay for that as well. So again, there's a link to memo 616 and it'll tell you all the ins and outs of that project. 618, this is a statewide allocation of $2 million. It does have a district-specific allocation, and it's allocated at $49 per eligible student, and that will be based on your October 1, 2024 student count for ages 14 through 21. This is about secondary transition. The minimum allocation for a district is 1,075. The maximum is 80,000. And it must be used for either development or expansion of secondary transition programs for students with disabilities ages 15 through 22. So just know that that is available to you as well. And your district-specific allocation will be in GMS under these project numbers. Project 619 is also a statewide allocation of $2 million. And it is to help districts implement the OKMTSS multi-tiered system of support. and it lists specific activities. Um, and for each group of activities that you submit documentation for, we will reimburse the district between $5,000 and $30,000 per completed set of activities. So this is available only to 68 districts, and we emailed superintendents last July to let them know if they were one of the 68 districts, and they should have been notified. This Project 619 memo gives you all the details about how to use this funding. The 68 districts are chosen this way. If you have 0% proficiency in 4th and 8th grade ELA or math, and math, if you have 0% proficiency in your IEP subgroup, then you are one of the 68 who will be eligible for these funds. The next one is Project 630. It has a statewide allocation of $200,000. If you have a student who needed more support than your district could offer because of either a vision impairment or a hearing impairment, and the student needs to attend Oklahoma School for the Deaf or Oklahoma School for the Blind, we will pay up to 75% of a paraprofessional that's required by the IEP. In some cases, students who go to Oklahoma School for the Deaf or Oklahoma School for the Blind require a one-to-one paraprofessional who will work at the school with that student. But the district is responsible for that salary. And so this is a way to support districts when they are trying to pay for that one-to-one para at Oklahoma School for the Deaf or Oklahoma School for the Blind. And that application is also through GMS. And 630 is, there's a memo that tells you all the details. So one that we have coming soon is going to be about behavior funding. It's going to have a statewide allocation of $1 million. Our goal is to have it up and ready July 1. And this will reimburse districts for contracting with outside behavior professionals, maybe a BCBA or a school psychologist, if your district doesn't already have those, and you have exhausted the capacity of your own district staff and personnel to address behavior of a particular student on an IEP, then this gives you funds that you can use to contract with someone to bring a specialist in to help you address the behavior of that particular student. And again, that will be a statewide allocation, and it can be used until the funding is gone. It's not a specific allocation just to your district, a certain amount. So those are the projects that are available for extra funding for you. Any questions about those projects? I'm just curious, has anyone ever used any of these projects? Okay, some people are using some of it. Somebody asked in the chat, I can't see the whole thing. Let me click over here.
One of our districts asked, is there a limit to Project 613?
So on Project 613, there is a statewide allocation of $500,000, and there's nothing specific to your district. So you can use it until the project money is gone. And like I said, it's never been gone. Good, Becky. I'm glad to see that you've used them. Great. I want people to use them.
Full Cord is that district that Becky just put in the chat.
Good. And Hulbert's used 615. Somebody else is using 619. Good. I'm glad to see that. So, um, so on 613, those are agency sponsored professional developments. And that's the one that has a statewide allocation, not specific to your district. CALT training could be done with your allocated 615 funds. We don't have any projects under 613 that are state sponsored at this point, but you could use your allocated 615 funds. Okay, so I want to talk to you about improving outcomes. This is something that is near and dear to my heart, and I kind of want to show you, first of all, Oklahoma's IEP subgroup data story. So we're talking about only IEP students. On the left is reading, on the right is math. In the green is the OSTP, and in the orange is the OAP. So these are the percentage of students on an IEP scoring proficient. So in fourth grade, we have 7.57% of our students across the state scoring proficient in reading. And one of the things that I like to remind people about is this is all students with IEPs. So if I have a student who is a speech student, I would expect that the speech student would be able to have proficiency in reading. If I have a student who is a specific learning disability student in math, I would expect that they would be proficient in reading. A lot of our students who have social emotional issues, emotional disturbance, a lot of them can and are performing on grade level. So, there is no expectation that every student with a disability is going to perform at the proficient level. Of course, when you think about it, there's no, it's true that not every gen ed student is performing at proficient, but we should have greater than single digits in our proficiency levels for the OSTP. So eighth grade is at 3.6%, are scoring proficient. 11th grade, 8.77 are scoring proficient. And then with our OAP kids, we're out of the single digits, but many, many more of these should be scoring proficient on our alternate assessment. And then for math, fourth grade math really is our strongest area on the OSTP. Eighth grade is the weakest at a 3 point, or actually, I guess 11th grade is the weakest. But we would want to see those numbers improve as well. And then when you look at the 4th, 8th, and 11th grade math in OAP, we do have some stronger proficiency in that area, but we have some work to do still. So that being said, we have identified just one priority in special education, and that is to improve the outcomes for students with disabilities. That is our most important thing that we are working toward. And I've shown this slide, these next two slides a lot, and I think that they're really important. As educators, we understand that the best way that you can improve student outcomes is through stronger instruction. What your teachers are teaching, that is the key. But we know that there are some ineffective practices that we know limit improved outcomes. And I have 5 on this slide. And what I encourage districts is if you are doing any of these 5, choose one and get rid of it, because we know that these practices limit improved outcomes. So let's talk through them. Special education curriculum. This is a particular passion of mine. I started teaching, believe it or not, 1988. And they walked me into my brand new special education classroom, this brand new 22-year-old teacher, and they opened a closet that was so musty with all the old books that were in there. A lot of the copyright dates were from the 60s. And to put that in perspective, that means if I have a brand new teacher walking in today to curriculum that's 20 or 25 years old, that means it was only 2000. Okay, so I know that there is old curriculum out there that we are expecting special ed teachers to use to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. Think about this, and I know that this happens lots and lots. Well, two things. The first is when the district adopts new curriculum, what happens to the old curriculum? Any ideas? It goes to special ed. That's what happens to it. Okay? That is not appropriate. The other thing is teachers are relying a lot on teachers pay teachers. There's no scope and sequence. It's not aligned to standards. It is not effective. And so if your special ed classrooms do not have curriculum that's appropriate, that's one of the things that you need to get rid of. Okay? The second one is full inclusion. Now, your first thought might be, well, don't we want full inclusion? I'm talking about the kind of full inclusion that some districts wear as a badge of honor. We are full inclusion. All of our students are in gen ed. What they are really saying is we have all of our kids in a gen ed class, but we don't have any specially designed instruction, which is special education, and we don't have appropriate supports for our students when they are in the gen ed class. Full inclusion done that way is not a badge of honor to wear. That means that students are not getting the supports that they need. So if you are a full inclusion district where you are not providing specially designed instruction and adequate supports for students who are participating in your gen ed classes, or you just don't have any pull-out classes because you don't have a teacher, you are not going to improve outcomes that way. So if that's your practice, I would challenge you to get rid of it and replace that. The next one is replacement instruction. I mentioned earlier, I was a classroom teacher for 20 years, and I did this. I did replacement instruction. What that is as a special ed teacher, I would go to the gen ed teacher and I would say, Johnny's on my caseload for reading. What time is your reading block? From 10 to 11? Great. I'll come get Johnny, take him to my class. I will teach him reading from 10 to 11. When your reading is over, I will send him back. I did that my entire career. Research says that is not an effective practice. And so I hate that I did that for 20 years. But this is your opportunity to set that aside. Replacement instruction is an ineffective practice that we need to eliminate. So the next one, this is something that we see a lot in severe profound classes, but it can happen in behavior classes. It can happen in mild classes. And this is where we're using paras for the initial instruction. The problem with that is you take your least trained staff person and put them with your highest needs kiddo. That's a horrible pairing. You should be pairing your highest trained staff with your highest need kids. Paras are not that. So if you're using paraprofessionals for initial instruction, I would challenge you to get rid of that. The last one is programming based on disability category. I know you've heard these terms, the LD lab, the ED class, the ID class, okay? We can't have programming that's based on disability category. We can't name our classes that. We can't name our programs that. We can't write our IEP components based on disability category. We can't design our instruction based on disability category. So if you are doing that, I challenge you to get rid of that, because we know that that is a practice that limits improved outcomes. So let's flip that. Let's look at what the effective practices are, the converse of these that will improve outcomes. First, in our special ed classrooms, we need to make sure that we use evidence-based curriculum with fidelity. Next, we need to make sure that we adapt the content, methodology, and delivery of instruction, and we need to intertwine that in every environment, whether it's the gen ed class where a special ed student is, in a resource lab, in a self-contained class. We need to make sure, when you look at the words adapting content, methodology, and delivery of instruction, that comes straight out of IDEA reg, and that is the definition of specially designed instruction. That's what we need to be doing for students with disabilities. I talked to you about my practice back when I was in the classroom of replacement instruction. The flip of that is a multi-tiered system of support. It's a layering of supports. It's not replacement of gen ed, but a layering of gen ed and special ed. We also want to jump in and use those high leverage practices. And I don't know if you've taken any time to look at the Hattie factors or influences, but those are fascinating. And teacher efficacy is one of the highest rated Hattie factors. What your teachers believe that your students can and can't do. Those are effective practices that we want to see in every special ed classroom. And the appropriate use of paraprofessionals is for repeated instruction after the initial instruction has been given, for skill, practice, for rehearsal. We can use paraprofessionals, training them with protocols to take data on student trials. That is an appropriate use. Providing initial instruction or writing the lesson plans is not, and that happens. The last one is we have to make use of individual student data to drive our instructional decision-making and our IEP development. It cannot be based on student category. That does not support a student. Making our decisions on data-driven decision-making, that appropriately supports students. And these are the practices that improve outcomes for students with disabilities. And I would encourage you to eliminate those ineffective practices and replace them with these effective practices. One of my favorite sayings, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And now that you know what these ineffective practices are and the effective practices, this is what I would wish for you, is that when you know better, you're going to do better. Okay. So here's some supports that we have coming up for you. Special Education Conference will be at the Oklahoma City Convention Center, July 27th through the 30th. The 30th is a post-conference, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But the main conference is the 27th, 28th, and 29th. Because we are hosting it, it is free. It is eligible for Project 613. So if you have staff that you want to send and you live more than 60 miles from Oklahoma City, we can help support with mileage and paying for hotel. Again, we don't do the per diem, but we do the other. So that might be something that you want to think about. we have really encouraged special education leaders to be about instructional leadership. And we are focusing, last year, our conference was very compliance focused because compliance is something that we have to do in special education. But we also know from 40 years of research that improved compliance does not equal improved outcomes. Improved instruction improves outcomes. So last year we hit the compliance because we have to. This year, all of our focus of the entire conference is going to be on literacy. Next year, our entire conference will be focused on math, and the following year on behavior, because we want to improve outcomes in those areas. So this year, for literacy, we'll have 6 different tracks. We'll have a mild, moderate elementary track, a mild, moderate secondary track, a severe, profound track, an early career special educator or teacher track, a director of special education track, and a related service provider track for like OTs and speech therapists. We are going to have a really heavy focus with vendors for literacy. And so our hope is if your district doesn't have literacy curriculum that you're using for your special ed classes, that you will engage with some of these vendors and find just the right evidence-based curriculum that you can use in your special ed setting. Now, we do have a post-conference opportunity that will be on July 30th. There will be a half day for early career special education teachers, 5 years or less. There will be a half day for first year special education directors. And there will be a full day for paraprofessionals. And again, all of this is eligible for Project 613 because they're all sponsored by us. Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about is change is on the horizon. And I'm going to pull some regs from the IDEA to kind of give you some context. And then I'm going to describe to you what kind of change is on the horizon for Oklahoma. So 34 CFR 300.307, this is the Code of Federal Regulations regarding IDEA. And this is about specific learning disabilities. And this whole next section that I'm talking to you about is specific to specific learning disabilities, not any other category of special education, just specific learning disabilities, okay? So the requirement to the state is the state must adopt criteria for determining whether a child has a specific learning disability as defined in 300.8. And in addition, the criteria adopted by the state gives these 3 points. The criteria must not require the use of a severe discrepancy. We're going to talk about those models in just a minute. It must permit the use of a process based on the child's response to scientific or research-based intervention, and it may permit the use of other alternative research-based procedures for determining whether a child has a specific learning disability. So IDEA guidance to the state says you must not require the discrepancy model. You must permit the RTI model, and you may permit what we call a pattern of strengths and weaknesses. It's not a very common method for identifying specific learning disability. So the Federal Register, it says that states are responsible for developing that criteria to determine whether or not a child is a child with disability, as defined in 308, including whether a child meets the criteria for having a specific learning disability. It says that states are free to prohibit the use of a discrepancy model. States, including states that did not use a discrepancy model prior to the act, are not required to develop criteria that permit the use of the discrepancy model. Now, this is language from 2006, and what I can tell you is many states have no longer permits or they have prohibited the use of the discrepancy model in identifying a student with a specific learning disability. In Oklahoma, we have not made a statewide decision. We have allowed districts to select between two models, between the discrepancy model for identification of specific learning disabilities or the RTI model for identifying a student with a specific learning disability. And right now, what happens is every year, as part of their annual assurances, the superintendent selects what model the district will use. Will you be a discrepancy model district or will you be an RTI model district? And whichever one is selected in the annual assurances, that's what the district has to use in identifying students with a specific learning disability. And you have to implement it with fidelity. So currently in Oklahoma, fewer than 25 districts have selected the response to intervention or the RTI model, which means of our 540 something districts, by a long shot, are using the discrepancy model to identify students with a specific learning disability. And I will tell you, of these 25, very few are doing it well using the RTI model. And we're hoping to shore that up. So with the discrepancy model, we do two tests. We do an ability test or an IQ test, and we do an achievement test. And the idea is if your IQ is high, we would expect that your achievement in school would be high. If your IQ is low, we would expect that your achievement in school would be low. And no matter where you are in this IQ range, your achievement should run with it within a small range. What happens with the discrepancy model is we in Oklahoma have identified 1.5 standard deviations, so 22.5 point gap. We're looking for a discrepancy, a gap between between ability and achievement. And if you have a 22.5 point gap, we can identify you as a student with a specific learning disability. Does that sound familiar? My guess is the majority of your districts are using this discrepancy model. It says in the law that as a state, we get to choose what model we're going to use. But in the state, we have allowed districts to choose. That's going to change. So let's talk about the pros and cons of the discrepancy model. The pro is it's really simple to use. We do two tests, we do a mathematical calculation. It's pretty easy to use. It requires a single staff person for evaluation, and it doesn't really require any classroom teacher time. Another pro is it does not require a district-wide system. So it makes it really easy to use. And that's why most districts rely on it. The cons are, and you all have seen this happen a million times, it is not accurate for young students, and it risks us giving an incorrect diagnosis of a specific learning disability. You've also probably heard this. It's a wait to fail model. How many of you have heard in your districts that it's really not reasonable to test kids before about the 3rd grade because they're not going to qualify? And the reason they say that is because the gap is not big enough. So it's not to say that there's not a gap, it's just not big enough. So we got to wait and wait and wait until the gap is big enough. Then we can identify a student with a disability, a specific learning disability. That is a terrible way to do things. Just waiting until the gap is big enough. It's a reactive model rather than a proactive model. So let's talk about the response to intervention model. It is a proactive model, and it's applied to all ages. We can do interventions with kids in pre-K. We can do interventions with kids in kindergarten, in first grade, right? It provides early intervention when a student begins to show signs of struggle. We don't wait until the gap gets big. We start intervening right now. It minimizes incorrect labeling. What it does is it takes a student, and if we are doing evidence-based, research-based interventions, and we cannot show a trend line that this student is making progress, if we have adequate data through our multi-tiered system, through our RTI process, that a student with adequate core instruction and adequate interventions is not making adequate growth, we can identify that student as being a student with a disability, a specific learning disability. The problem is that is going to require the district to have a really robust system for intervention. In the district where I was a director for 13 years, we used the discrepancy model. Why? It wasn't because I didn't know the discrepancy model was a terrible model. It is a terrible model. What I didn't have was a general ed, district-wide, robust system for interventions that could help me utilize an RTI process. That's what I would have wanted to have had. But as a special education director, I didn't feel like I had the authority or the influence to change that. But you all, you do have the ability to change that. And it does require extra work for the general education teachers. Most of the time, a tier 2 is a gen ed function of the general education teacher in the classroom. But it is so worth it compared to what an RTI model looks like. Without this RTI model, there are going to be kids that would not have been identified as a student with a specific learning disability because of the intervention. Whereas if they didn't have the intervention and we use the discrepancy model, they may be classified as specific learning disabled when perhaps they wouldn't be if we had given them early intervention. So that's what this model is all about. It's a proactive model applied to all ages. So here's where the change comes. Oklahoma, as a state, is going to sunset its use of the discrepancy model. Remember, we read that it's allowable that a state can prohibit the use of a discrepancy model? That's where we are headed. Beginning August of 32, Oklahoma will prohibit the use of the discrepancy model. Now, your first thought is probably, well, 32, that's a long way away, and I'll probably be retired by then, or that'll be somebody else's problem. The reason that we gave you till 32 is not so that you can put it off. It's because it takes a long time for a district to develop a robust district-wide system that can identify students K through 12 as a student with a learning disability. Not only in math, or not only in reading, but in math and written expression, right? Those are the things that those are the areas that we identify a specific learning disability. So the expectation is that the district is going to have a robust system district-wide that's going to allow you to use your MTSS and your RTI to identify a student with a specific learning disability based on the data. Whoops. So, what do districts need to do to prepare for this transition? First thing is you need to evaluate the effectiveness of your current MTSS system in the general education setting, not only for reading. I think people have a fair understanding of a tiered system as it relates to literacy in K through 3 because of our Strong Readers Act. I think that people have a good understanding of that. But this has to apply all the way up to 12th grade, and it has to apply to math and written expression. And so the first thing that you need is administrative support for this kind of a transition. And then the next thing is you're going to be developing a system at all grade levels to support written expression, oral language, listening comprehension, math, and reading. It is impossible for a district to come in and create this K to 12 for all of these subject areas in a single year. It's impossible. You have to start small. You have to start where you are and expand it. Maybe your expansion is going to be K through 3 math. Maybe your expansion is going to be, you've already got K through 3 literacy in place to some degree. Maybe you're going to expand that up to 8th grade. But you have to start where you are and begin to expand it so that by the time that we sunset the discrepancy model, you have a strong method to be able to identify students with a specific learning disability. And again, that only applies to that one category of disability. So the way that it looks is this is going to be a phased implementation. And we've talked about it in this way. First, discovery. We are still meeting district educators who don't really have any understanding of OKMTSS. And so first, we want them to begin to discover and understand what it is. And then in the inquiry phase, we want them to begin to inquire about how and which ways to expand their current system. And then action, that's when you're really working all across all the grades and all the subject areas. So the way that it plays out is we have dedicated 2024 through 2026 for discovery. We're getting ready to move into our inquiry phase where districts are beginning to implement it and expand it. And then action is where you're using it with fidelity across lots of grades, across lots of subject areas. So that by 2032, your district is ready to use your RTI system to identify students with a specific learning disability. So, how can districts start and continue this journey? Well, you're fortunate. As part of the OCLSD grant, you're already on this journey. You're already headed down this path. We would want you to take advantage of everything that's available to you through the grant in building out your tiered interventions. We would want for you to attend the OKMTSS summer and winter conferences, and we would love for you to attend the special ed conference. And that is all that I have, and I know that that's a lot. What are your thoughts? What are your questions?
So, Sherri, we did have a question in the chat about the behavior funding that is coming. Is that
Yes.
something schools will apply for? How will they access that?
So it will be in GMS. And just like each of those other projects, we'll have a memo that tells all of the details. We're in the process of developing that right now. It will be available for districts beginning July 1. And it's just an allocation to the whole state, and you can budget through GMS for bringing in a specialist for behavior. So it's in the GMS process thing. It's not there yet, July 1.
And Sherri, how will that information get out to districts?
So I host a director call on the second Monday of every month where we go, where we talk about every opportunity that is coming up that month for professional development and anything that's coming up that's new in our funding. That's where I communicate that. We have an information bulletin that goes out every Tuesday. We used to send it through email in our listserv, but that we've had an agency change on how that is used. And so where ours is posted at 5 o'clock every Tuesday is in Ed Plan. At the very bottom, there is a section called Documents, and there's a tab called Info Hub. And every Tuesday at 5 o'clock, we update the information from our office. So that's two ways that we make sure that we get it out.
And then we also had a question. Is there a list of special education curriculum available on SDE's website?
No, but let me tell you this. We are going to jump into the textbook adoption cycle for special ed. Special ed has never been in the textbook adoption cycle for the state of Oklahoma. Not this year of science, or this coming year for science and social studies and one other thing I can't remember. But the following year, it will be for elementary ELA, and we're going to do a request for information and put approved curriculums for elementary ELA and also for all of OAP. We'll put those two out there that year. We will be able to, or districts will be able to use their textbook funds to purchase. It will not give your district more funds than you've had. It's not going to be an increase, but at least it will allow them to use those funds. But the district, if they have other sources of funding, if they want to use their IDEA funding or some of their general funds to purchase special ed curriculums, they can do that outside the textbook adoption cycle. But we wanted to make it available through the textbook adoption cycle, which will also be new. Any other questions? I think the main thing that I would want you to hear from us is that we are absolutely here to support you. So please, 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 please call us, email us, let us know how we can support you.
Sherri, it's Emily. Thank you so much for being on today, and what a wealth of knowledge you are just about SPED resources available through special education for our districts. It was one of the qualifying areas for the competitive grant, and so anytime that we can gain additional knowledge, gain resources, whether it be programmatic or fiscal from that's available in SPED, I think it can only help our districts, especially in that population. So your time today and everything you shared is so appreciated.
Absolutely. Someone in the chat asked for how to sign up for our director calls. If they'll just email Megan Salisbury, I put her email address in the chat and she'll get you on.
All right. I know we put the slide deck in the chat, but it's also already uploaded to our hub. And this recording will also be uploaded by the end of the day. So if you want to go back and watch it again or share it with anyone else in your district, it should be there by the end of today. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, thank you so much, Sherri, for getting on. And thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.